All right, and we're live. Colin, thanks very much for joining me on this podcast. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
So, you recently acquired a pretty popular app off of Microquire, and before we started recording, we were kind of going over that, and I was telling you there was about 100 people that had reached out, a lot of interest in the app. Do you want to just kind of start there? Maybe just give your background, how you kind of stumbled across that app, and we'll kind of go through the story from start to finish.
Yeah. So, abbreviated background, I've done a bunch of different startups, Stretchy Gene Company, TV and movie recommendation company, like a software marketing agency, sharing economy startup, a bunch of failures, basically like sticking my hand in electrical sockets and finding bad businesses. Through that, I ended up in venture capital. So I was working at Builders VC and spun out a couple years ago with some of those folks. So now we have Formulated, which is a automation agency. We have Avocado, which is a audio course platform, and then we like through that process, it's like we're spinning up 1 to 2 new companies a year, and it's pretty hard even for people that have done it before. And I kind of discovered the holding company model or the micro P model, which is adjacent to the studio model. And it's like, oh, you could just acquire product market fit and you don't have to do the 0 to 1 phase, and you could just use an established playbook and grow. So yeah, stumbled across microacquire in that process and did our first acquisition a few months ago. Probably do like 3 more this year is our plan.
Nice. Tell me about, so you initially came across the listing. How did you initially reach out to the buyer?
Just on microacquire, just sent a message. And then Brandon, who is the seller, Brandon and Patrick reached out to me. He read like every blog post I have on my website, and I have like a bit of an online presence, a bit of a Twitter following. And he was like, really would like to work with you. Had our first call and it went really well. I'd say we just like vibed. We both did similar companies that flamed out and we're able to like kind of bond over that. And he was more interested in finding like a really good fit and a good steward for the business because they'd worked on it for 10 plus years than optimizing sales price.
I think that's awesome, and I always recommend that in terms of just having a good relationship with the seller or as a seller, even with the buyer, just because you're not acquiring like a car. It's not just like here's the keys, good luck, post acquisition, which we'll get to. I'm sure there was some things that Brandon helped with. Was there anything you did to like stand out in terms of your like questions or just your approach or any, I guess, put it another way, if you had advice for first time buyers when they're reaching out to sellers, what are some things that you'd recommend doing and not doing?
Yeah, if you just have like an online history, it goes a long way. Like you can't really fake that. You can't fake being a good person over like 10 plus years in the industry. So that I think was obvious to them before we even had the first call, like that we were going to be good people to deal with and we weren't going to try to screw them. It is very much not like handing the keys over. Like it was a very close process where we were talking every day for a long time of just like there's 20 plus accounts and nothing actually transfers easily, or some of it does. Stripe transfers easily. A lot of the rest does not.
Nice. Tell me about the, okay, so you come to terms. Walk me through the process from there. How quickly did you submit an LOI? How quickly did you move to a purchase agreement? What did that process look like?
Yeah. So we knew, I had no idea there were that many other buyers, but I knew there were a couple other offers on the table. And I can't discuss actual terms, but I felt like our offer was not going to be the highest. So we moved really quickly and kind of in a weird twist, they weren't willing to sign an exclusive LOI. So we really wanted to move fast. And I actually wrote down all the dates so I could go through it. So first discovered on January 19th, 20th, first call, 25th, offer made over email. So we did all the diligence in like 5 days there. And then tentative acceptance was 6 days later on the 31st. And then we were kind of off to the races. Signed the LOI actually on the February 3rd, 3 days later. And then it was a lot of back and forth with the lawyers on terms that ended up really not changing whatsoever. And then in the middle there, it was like the snowstorm in Texas,
I
and
remember that.
Brandon actually just left because there was a threat of them losing power, and he went to Florida. So that like kind of delayed us for a week plus, but nothing changed. Like so, it took 41 days total, and really there's only like I don't know 6 days of real work in there, and just like setting up a company, getting the money wired over, and everything took most of the rest of the time, and dealing with lawyers back and forth.
Nice. I like how you, so just to clarify, you confirmed on terms just verbally over email before actually putting that into a letter of intent, correct?
Yeah, exactly, and nothing changed really from there.
Yeah, I like that because you're not like just shooting off a letter of intent and then you're not on the same page and you have to go back and edit that. I think that's a good tip for buyers is, make sure you're on the same page before firing off like a legal document. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, so it was a relatively small deal. It was in the six figures, but we didn't want it all to get eaten up with legal fees on really either side. So using lawyers like as little as possible was kind of our goal. I know a lot of people like to get people tied up with an LOI and then like try to negotiate them down. I don't think you're going to last very long in this like micro P world if you build a reputation for like messing with people like that.
Yeah, I agree. I see, sometimes people will fire up an LOI too soon. I think it's important to be on terms before sending it off. So nice move there. I guess my next question would be, okay, you're on the same page, you got the letter of intent signed. What happens after that? Did you use escrow.com? What was kind of the planned, closing and transition? What did that look like?
Yeah, it was a little funky. So we talked about escrow. We both felt like there was enough trust there that we didn't want to do it. They wanted effectively our lawyers to be escrow, like they would hold the signed documents as things kind of transferred over. We didn't really want to, pay our lawyers to do that. So we just kind of, it was, I don't know, mostly trust and like starting to hand stuff over. And as soon as they handed over a few things, we wired all the money and just kind of went. So it was definitely a little bit of a leap of faith, but it worked out really well.
Nice. And then in terms of transition, how did you, so there's, I assume, multiple services that uh, Blink Sale had attached to it, like AWS, billing, Stripe, everything. How did you document all that? Did you just make like a list and then you kind of checked off each one as you transferred them over? Like, how did you organize like that process of all the assets and accounts that you were going to be acquiring?
Yeah, we used the Notion doc and they put in the login information there. And then it was like check, like transition credit card to our credit card. We have access to the account now, check, kind of like that. I probably just use Google Sheets going forward for that kind of thing.
Yeah, just simple checklists. I like that. I've actually seen the transfer doc. That's why I asked. So that's awesome. And then, okay, so you have everything transferred over. What did post acquisition support look like with Brandon?
So like it wasn't a finite list. The things kept being added, and we're like, oh, we actually have a PayPal account. We don't know where this money is coming from, but here it is, and that's like 5 days later. And then we had to do a reconcile roughly a month later, and then trademarks also were delayed a little bit, like the transferring of trademarks to us. Uh, but it was all pretty straightforward. Like, is a little bit of you have some of our money, we have some of your money a month later, but it's all good now. So a month out, we're about all set.
Nice. And so what are the, so that's kind of like the start to finish. It all sounded like it went so smoothly. I guess any tips for like first time buyers or any like learnings from this acquisition?
I I think it went really well for us. Find someone you could trust. Like it's hard to do a good deal with a bad person. It was really helpful for us that Brandon had gone through acquisitions before, so he definitely like walked us through it a little bit. But no, I find it on MicroAcquire would be my recommendation. I think it would have been really hard for us to like do our own outbound initially and find something that someone was willing to sell. And now, like since I've done it, I get a lot of inbound, and that's probably where our next acquisitions will come from. But MicroAcquire is amazing to get started.
Nice. I appreciate that shout out. I guess, final questions. Lots of people are interested in acquisitions these days. Where would they go to learn more? I know you have a blog, correct? or a newsletter that you've started?
Yeah. So I have a blog, just colinkeeley.com. I'm actually working on a course. So we have a course company, and I think there's just a ton of interest. And this is like one of the most opaque industries as far as like sourcing a deal, walking through negotiation, closing a deal, all that stuff, and how to grow it afterwards. So I'm hopefully going to launch a course in the next couple weeks here. I'm probably like halfway done with outlining it. That will go a long way, hopefully, for people as well.
Nice. I remember you mentioning that, and I'm on the hook for sharing that with everyone in MicroAcquire when that's done. What is that going to include? Like, what parts are you going to go over? Uh, just what's kind of like the short teaser if you give one on the course.
Yeah. So I've been outlining it in Rome, which has been really helpful. So, why buy versus build, choosing your niche, like the whole deal process overview, sourcing, like the different marketplaces, brokers, outbound email templates, diligence, negotiation, like the whole walkthrough of modeling out a business and negotiating on a price for SaaS or e-commerce. And then the different ways you could structure deals and finance them. And then afterwards, after you close, how a playbook for like boosting returns. And all this is kind of with the mindset of just, it's like monetizing our exhaust. So like we had to do all this work anyway. And this is just opening it up and like walking people through, like, these are the actual templates we use. And this is how our deals go down.
That's awesome. Well, Colin, I appreciate you joining me on this podcast. I guess if people wanted to connect with you and learn more, where could they find you?
Yeah, I'm super active on Twitter. So find me, Colin Keeley, on Twitter. And then if you want to read anything, colinkeeley.com. Brent and I also have a weekly podcast called Creator Stories, where we basically have calls every day. And I was just like, let's make our Friday one open. So that is kind of documented our whole experience of like stumbling into this micro private equity world and everything we've learned along the way. So I think that'll be beneficial for people as well.
Awesome. Colin, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast.
Absolutely. Take care.
Cheers.